Good evening, everybody, and welcome to webinar 23. We currently have 50 people in the room, so excellent. Welcome in, get yourself comfortable. We can't see you. Hopefully you can see us. If you can't see us, speak to Omar. If you can't hear us, then this message, you won't be getting it, so don't worry about that. But if the sound is a little bit dodgy too, also speak to Omar. So if you can tell us, where in the world are you tonight? I realise that where in the world you are, it might not be tonight, it might be daytime. So where in the world are you? Are you a social worker? Are you a student? Have you just wandered into this webinar by accident? If you have, you're more than welcome to stay. So yeah, where in the world are you? Are you a social worker? Are you a student? Are you a practitioner? Tell us about yourself, and also tell us what you've had for your tea. I know some of you call it dinner, and I'm really sorry that you're not saying the right words, but just tell us what you've had for your tea, and then we'll have a chat, and then we'll get on with the webinar. So let's have a look what people are writing.
So tonight we're joined by Debbie Greaves, who I've known now for a number of years. Debbie has been a social worker and seems to have lived and worked all over the world. And when we were chatting before we opened up the webinar, I realised she's lived and worked in many more places, and every time it's somewhere else. So all over the world, really. So I suppose in a way what that shows is the globalisation, I think, of social work now. So it is fabulous when we have these webinars that we're joined by social workers from many different countries, and we're all beginning to connect together. But tonight we're going to be looking at a really important topic, and one that I think is just important anyway, but at the moment, with the way in which we're all working and how we're now beginning to connect much more with the people that we seek to support, then digital safeguarding is so much more important. And so I am really looking forward to learning tonight about social work and digital safeguarding. And so I'm just going to, without any kind of taking away any more time from this really important topic, I'm going to hand over to you, Debbie, if that's okay.
Thank you very much, and good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everybody that's here. And I am looking forward to talking with you about this tonight, digital social work and digital safeguarding. And a couple of things I'll say at the start is I really want you to think about this from both a personal point of view, but also a professional point of view, whether you're a student, whether you're a practice educator or a practice teacher, or whether or not you're a social worker that's been qualified for months or years. This is a conversation that maybe it's the start of the conversation for you, or maybe it is a conversation that you've already started and it is just topping that up, because this is a conversation that needs to continue on. And I want you to think about this in lots of different ways. Think about it in terms of how you can help yourself and your family and your friends in your personal life, but also how you can help the service users that you're working with, because what we can do is encourage them to develop their digital skills as well. And if you're a practice teacher or practice educator, thinking about how you can support students as well. So there's lots to get through, and there are some resources that will come after this as well. So, and do some research yourself would be useful too. And I can't cover everything, so I've had to take out lots of slides. I could talk about this until the cows come home, because I just absolutely find this topic fascinating. So hopefully it'll give you a taster. There is a chat box, and the team's going to be looking at the chat box. So if there's any burning questions or anything that I say that you think I'm not really sure what that means, pop it in the chat box and we'll stop at different points and have a chat about that. And so, yep, we'll start. So what are we going to look at today? Is a number of things. We're going to look at the awareness of the impact of our online lives on our role as social workers or social work students. Consider the impact of our online behaviour, our digital footprint. Critical thinking skills for us and also for our service users. So how can we develop that criticality in our interaction with technology, and how can we help service users develop theirs as well? Living digitally, those benefits and the challenges for social work. So what does that actually mean when we put things online, whether it's resources and services, and what does that do in terms of increase inequalities for people who may not have the same access to technology as we do. We'll look very briefly at standards and ethics, and I know that people are from all over the world, so we'll talk very briefly around that and look at universal values, international values around social work, so the International Federation of Social Work Values, but also the British Association of Social Work Values as well. And some top tips. So I've got some top tips for you, and it's really hard for me to sort of really squash those into a couple of slides, but hopefully they will be useful as a starter for you. Okay, so let's get on with it, folks. So why is this important? Well, I'm going to argue the case here. It's really important because in our practice, in our when we are going out on placement, we talk explicitly about physical safety. So if you're going out on home visits, lone worker policies, signing in, signing out, letting people know where you are. So we talk about that. We talk about mental and emotional safety and well-being, and making sure that you've got that work-life balance and self-care and the importance of supervision. But we also need to think about our digital safety. So when we embark on a career such as social work, we need to think about not just those physical safety issues, but also our digital safety issues. Okay. So shared meaning is really important, folks, because I'm just conscious that I've already used a bit of jargon that some people might be thinking, what is she talking about? So I'm just going to go over these really quickly so we don't spend an awful lot of time, but just to highlight what I mean by this. Digital safeguarding, I'm going to use that term, digital safeguarding, instead of what you may have heard before, such as internet safety or e-safety. The reason why I'm referring to digital safeguarding rather than internet safety is because it's not about the internet anymore. It's about technology. Technology permeates every part of our life. We are becoming more connected. We have smart stuff in our homes. Our homes are connected. We might have smart fridges, smart cookers. We might have wearables. We might have tracking devices, all of those sorts of things, which is a lot more than just the internet. And safety, if we start talking about internet safety, we are only looking at one part of the overall safeguarding continuum. We're looking at the safety issue, which infers that there's something that you need to be protected from, which is, in my view, actually creates this sort of idea that the internet is potentially a dangerous place, and that's not really healthy, and it's not helpful. So safeguarding looks at the continuum of promoting, preventing, and protecting, which is what we would do in child protection. We don't just talk about child protection, we talk about safeguarding children, which is promoting, preventing, and protecting. The protecting bit is the thin edge of the wedge. When things go bad, we need to protect. So that's what we're talking about in terms of digital safeguarding. Digital citizenship, folks, is really how we behave when we engage with technology as citizens, because we do know that sometimes people engage in a very different way when they interact with technology than they would if they were face to face. So it's just looking at that and thinking about, what are you and what am I like as digital citizens, and how is that different or similar to how we behave face to face? Okay, and how we can support the people that we're working with be responsible digital citizens as well. Okay. Digital footprint, to put that simply, it's all the stuff that you put out there when you interact with technology. So what does the stuff that you put out there, whether it's posts or comments or things that you like, follow, share, groups that you're involved in, all of those things, that digital footprint that can connect back to you, what does that say about you in terms of your values, your beliefs, all of those sorts of things, and what impact can that have on you both now and in the future? So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Digital literacy then is a whole range of skills. It is similar to traditional literacy skills, but it's upping it a little bit. So it's how you can engage and use technology safely. and for us to be mindful that some of the families and individuals we're working with will not have functional literacy skills, let alone digital literacy skills. So we need to work with them and support them to access technology, to access the world in ways that are going to work for them. And I will touch a little bit on disability as well. So if someone can remind me from the team, remind me to mention disability too. Critical thinking skills fits very nicely with digital literacy skills, because we need to think critically when we engage with technology, and to even on a really simple sort of level, understand if something that we are looking at is an ad, or if it's evidence-based research, if it's advice or guidance or just someone's opinion, if it's discredited advice or dangerous advice, or peer-reviewed research, all of those sorts of things. Is it a scam? Is it clickbait? All of these sorts of things. So how can we develop our own critical thinking skills and also help our service users to develop their critical thinking skills too? Digital resilience really does just link back to even existing resilience. It's about how do you bounce back when things go wrong in the online spaces. And I think that we need to move away from this idea that, well, if something happens, just shut the internet down, take the device away, don't get back online. It's obviously dangerous. That's nonsense, and that's not helpful. We need to help people that we're working with, and indeed ourselves, if something doesn't go the way that we had hoped in the online spaces or when we're interacting with technology, it's how do we get over that? How do we manage that? How do we make sense of that? How do we address that in a way that's going to help us become more resilient? And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go along as well. Okay, and then data. So it's a big word and we might be taking it for granted, but I'm just going to sort of pull that apart a little bit. Data refers to a number of different things. Data can be information that we give directly and voluntarily. So anything that you share, anything that you put out there. So if you put photographs up on social media, that's data that you're giving directly. But then there's also data that you leave behind. So cookies are a really good example of data that's left behind. And then there's also inferred data. And by inferred data, I mean, it basically says what it says on the tin. It's things can be inferred by what you do when you interact with technology. So, for example, coming up to Christmas, if you're buying a whole lot of toys on Amazon and certain age groups of toys, it will be inferred that you have children of a certain age, or you have people in your family that you're buying for. If you, in late December, early January, start buying a whole stack of vegan stuff on your Tesco shop, the inference there might be that you're doing veganuary. Okay, so there's data that can be, there's information that can be extrapolated from your interactions with technology that may be useful to other people that are trying to market things to you or advertise to you or to sell things to you. So just being mindful of that. So there's data can be different things. So really interesting. I am just going to show you a book that I actually think it's really, really interesting. This one here, it's called Hello World. I have a thing about algorithms. I think algorithms are really interesting, and how this book is actually written by a mathematician, Hannah Fry. It's called Hello World, How to Be Human in the Age of the Machine. And I could recommend that you read that because it's brilliant. And there's a whole section for us in terms of social work and things like that. So that's the shared meaning. So hopefully that's useful, because I appreciate that sometimes jargon can get in the way of having a good conversation. So over to you, folks. What, if anything, have you done to safeguard your digital self at this stage of your social work career? And that could be if you're a student. What have you done to safeguard yourself? If you're a student or a social worker who's been qualified for a long time, practice educator, or just somebody who's interested in this topic, what have you done? So I'll find out from the team. Have a sip of my tea. What's coming through there, folks?
There's loads of things I'm trying to keep up. So I'll tell you a few and we'll end up having little bits each, won't we?
Okay.
So I'll tell you a few and the others can tell you some. So private on all social media accounts, privacy settings on maximum, changed name on Facebook, settings on private, changing of passwords, doing a Google search on myself to see what comes up, professional tweet.
Brilliant.
Making sure I'm not on the public electoral register, because then your name and address is online too. I didn't know that. I'm not on Facebook or Instagram. The only social media I have is WhatsApp. Avoiding Facebook. Private password code. That's what I've got so far. I don't know if the rest of the team have seen things, because it's coming so quickly.
Yeah, some think, Siobhan, that they realise that changing the name doesn't achieve anything, because they can still be found. It's more about being mindful of what they post. So realising maybe that somebody will see it. It's just making sure what they see is okay, which I hadn't thought of it.
So that's why somebody said they've deleted all their pictures and videos on social media.
Which I would call, folks, a digital spring clean, or some academics would call blog scrubbing. Go in there, clean up your digital house, folks. Amanda Taylor-Bezic from Queen's University talks about, she gives that analogy of it as being a digital house, and what are you doing to clean up that digital house? I think that's really important, is do a digital spring clean, because there are, similar to, like, if you look at clothes in your wardrobe that don't fit you from like maybe 10 years ago or 5 years ago or 6 months ago because of lockdown, and we've all eaten a few too many buns maybe, you're going to get rid of that stuff. And it's no different to your digital clutter. I think that's a really interesting kind of thing to think about. Russell Belk, those of you who love your theory, talks about consumerism and stuff. What sort of stuff do you have? And the fact that we don't see that our digital clutter is intangible, because it's out there in the ether, it's in a cloud, we don't see it. So we're probably not incentivized to clean it up until something goes wrong, or until somebody comes along that digital clutter or sifts through it for us, because they want to piece together bits of that clutter that are going to be used or abused for their purposes. For the person that said that they've pretty much taken themselves off all social media, I would say just reflect on that, because if you disengage from from technology because of those concerns, then you're missing out on so much as well. It's about being balanced, and not saying, well, I'm gonna just lock everything down and not engage with it because something could go wrong, because you're missing out on so much as well. It's about having a balance. And I think that idea that you take care with what you write is a really good message. So what you've said, folks, is actually what students say, and staff have said to me over the years. They are the what I would call the go-to things that people do in terms of cleaning up their digital self. So I just want you to think about a few other things. So do you allow search engines to link to your social media accounts? Because that increases your visibility. If you want to decrease your visibility, or if you want to have some control over who can find you, then that might be one way of unlinking, or at the very least, unlinking your personal social media accounts, potentially linking your professional or your work-based accounts. So thinking about that. Spring cleaning your life, so your photos, your pages, your groups, and your friends. Spring clean your friends, folks. Get rid of them. You know, I don't have the same friends from primary school for very good reasons. So just go through that, friends, have a look at that, and see that measure of, am I actually friends with them in real life? Would I invite them around to my house and have a meal with me? If the answer is no, really ask yourself, why are you still friends with them, or are you just acquaintances? Talk with your family and friends about how they should respond if they're contacted by others, or if someone's masquerading and pretending to be you. What would you expect your family or friends to do if that happens in the in digital spaces? Similar to if you bumped into a service user and you were out shopping with your family, you wouldn't want your family members to come up and say, who is this, and start a conversation. So those boundary discussions need to be had online and offline. Someone's already talked about Googling themselves. What's out there, folks? And there may be some things that you need to, through GDPR, the right to be forgotten, you might need to have some stuff removed or taken down if it no longer represents you, or it could be particularly tricky if it's in the public domain. As an absolute starter for one, folks, please, I implore you, make your friends lists private. Make it so that only your friends or only you can see the friends list, because that's actually a really easy way for people to clone your account, and that can cause bother for you as well. So, and the family connections. So, because if you think about the digital house again, if somebody wants to get through your front door of your digital house and that front door is locked because you've changed your passwords and you've got maximum security, but the windows are open or the back door's open, you can easily infiltrate somebody's life through other people. So it's just being mindful of that. So, and think about your professional online presence. And something that I've talked to Siobhan about before is, do you follow 100 people, or do that 100 people follow you, or is it you follow lots of people and not many people follow you, or vice versa? So just being mindful of that and considering whether or not you have a professional online presence as well. And lurkers, folks, we just need to be mindful of lurkers. There will be people that will just hang about online groups just to see what is being said, and just to be mindful of that, and being mindful of, if you are in social work groups or student social work groups, what's being talked about, and who's lurking in those spaces. So, and just being mindful of your conduct and what you say there. So there's a few tips for you. Okay, so the one thing that I would also say, I'm going to say that 100 times tonight. The one thing, there's about 100 things I have to say, but this is another really important point. It's really important to be balanced about this, folks. And I would really encourage you to think about, where do you sit on that continuum around your attitude towards technology? Are you on that side of technology's bad, technology's dangerous, it's risky, or it's great, it's exciting, I love it? Are you an optimist or a pessimist? Because thinking about our personal value base, that might seep into the advice and guidance that we give families and parents and carers and people that we work with. Okay, so I'm going to show you a few quotes that I think are absolutely brilliant and sum this up really well. The internet isn't good or bad. It's technology, and technology is neutral. It's defined by the people who use it. What we need to be mindful of is that technology can be used and technology can be abused. We have seen an increase, and certainly during lockdown, this is no surprise, we have seen an increase in domestic abuse, domestic violence and abuse, but we've also seen an increase in technology-assisted child sexual abuse, because more and more people are online. So we need to be mindful that technology can be used and technology can be abused, but it's not the actual product that's causing that, it's the person behind it. So we need to just think about, that there's all sorts of people that use technology for all sorts of reasons. Whilst the probability of harm is low, some exposure may increase digital resilience and thus reduce risks overall. So that's just being mindful there that, some things might happen to children, young people in the online spaces, but that may well give them the opportunity to learn and bounce back. Similar to if anything happened to them in face-to-face experiences such as bullying or anything like that, how we help them get over that is going to increase their resilience. I love this quote from Stephen Fry. I think people must understand that about the internet. It's a new city. It's a virtual city. And of course, there are parts of it that they will dislike, but you don't pull London down because it's got a red light district. So we just need to be mindful of that, it's a public space. Children, if you think about it in terms of a playground, it is a new space that children will play, explore and have fun. And this is where there might be a bit of a generation gap, because perhaps my parents would have known what the equipment was in the playground that I used to go on, and they knew what I could fall off or hurt myself or would be too, what slide was too big for me or things like that. Whereas the playground now, it's changed. And for some parents, understanding that new playground makes no sense. So the easiest thing to do is go back to our gut instinct and react and say, sure, what are you doing on that? What a waste of time. Why are you on that Fortnite or Roblox or whatever it is that you're doing? It makes no sense. And that's a generation thing. So we need to be very careful about that we don't start to get fatalistic and negative about it. And do you know what? Someone said this to me recently about parents who say to their children, why are you watching other people play games on TV or, sorry, online? Why are you watching that? That makes no sense to me. And, children are very right in turning around and saying to their parents, yeah, but you watch Bake Off, you watch football. I don't see you in the kitchen or outside playing football. Just because you watch other people do something, whether it's playing a game or unboxing some Play-Doh or something like that, doesn't mean that it's any less valuable. And I think we just need to be respectful and mindful of that. Okay, so children are at risk, both online and offline, but sometimes the online risks are potentially overstated. Whilst acknowledging the very real risk to children online, such occurrences are rare and parental fears are often unfounded. So being mindful of that, Dana Boyd talks about that. Paternalism and protectionism have often hindered young people's ability to develop their online resilience. And in terms of safety education around digital safety or internet safety or whatever you want to call it, there seems to be a risk narrative predominance in there. So it's just being mindful of that. We need to have a balanced narrative rather than saying the internet is bad. Okay. And finally, and this is something for you to reflect on, is that growing body of evidence that suggests that online and offline resilience and vulnerability are linked. So that's Andy Shabilsky is saying that, and I think that's a really important point. The people that we are working with will often be the most vulnerable citizens in our society, and they will often be impacted the most significantly by the worst of the harms that occur in the online spaces. So what can you do going forward to increase the resilience of the people that you're going to work with by talking to them about their digital lives and actually having that conversation, talking to them about that as part of their overall lived experience rather than not talking about it. So just think about that. What can you do that's going to increase that resilience and reduce that vulnerability is a really important thing for us to be mindful of. Okay. Okay, so just some examples of digital behaviours and the impact on social work. Every year, Ofcom do a whole series of reports looking at people's digital behaviours, and I would encourage you to have a look at those because they're absolutely fascinating for those of you who like statistics. So here we've got some recent statistics. 13% of UK adults do not use the internet, and that's unchanged for the last 6 years. And 3/4 of them say that nothing would encourage them to go online in the next 12 months. So if you think about that and think of the last number of months when we've been in this period of lockdown and how we've had to massively change the way that we interact with others, and how for some people their devices have been their lifeline. What has it been like for some of those people, for that 13% who do not engage? They are very low, or they're not technology consumers or users. What impact is that having on them? And what are the concerns that are stopping them from engaging with technology? Is it about digital skills, about literacy skills, about having the confidence or competence? What is that about? So we need to think about that. We also need to think about it from that digitalization end, because if we put all of our services online, if we have things, if there are digital hoops that people need to get through in order to access services, what does that do for this 13% of UK adults? So we need to think about that. People in low socioeconomic groups and over the age of 55 are less likely to go online. So go back and look at your demographic. Go back and have a look at the service user group that you're working with, and look at, are we building in, thinking about structural oppression, are we building into our design of our services, are we excluding a whole group of people because we are using technology in a way that's not actually service user friendly? And then this really interesting point about the understanding of our online advertising, and when people do Google searches and seeing the first thing that pops up, and not understanding necessarily that that's an advertisement. And so being mindful of that. This fascinated me, this stat, when it came out. It's probably more now because of lockdown. I would imagine that adults check their phones on average 12 minutes, every 12 minutes. So if you think about that, even just in terms of it is a fundamental part of all of our lives, technology. So it's just being mindful of that, being mindful of, we can't ignore people's digital lives. And this is an area that I'm particularly interested in. Is around sharing. When parents share about their children on social media, that'll account for 2/3 of identity fraud facing young people over the age of 18 by 2030. Now, if you think about it, all you really need to have to defraud somebody is a name, an address, and a date of birth. And parents sometimes inadvertently give that away when they're maybe putting stuff on social media that they think is friends only, but it's not. And they've got maybe the age of the child, their date of birth, because they've said happy birthday to my beautiful 8-year-old or whatever it is. You can figure out what the date of birth is. And if they're geotagged their address, or if they've geotagged a location, or if there's other ways in that amount of digital clutter that they have that you can find, you can get an address, then that's a very easy way to use for defrauding people. So and Barclays Bank have got a really interesting video about that. So you can Google that if you, or other search engines are available. But it's just being mindful of that when parents share about their children on social media, what impact that's going to have on them in the future. Okay. All right, and I'm going to have a pause after this and just see what questions people might have. But this is just thinking about how people access advice and the implications for practice. So what we need to be mindful, and this is all through research that I've done, and it was particularly in relation to sharing, but it is just something I think that you can have conversations with your service users. Ask them, when they talk to you and you give them advice, or you give them information, or you give them some resources, where do they go online afterwards? Do you ask that question? Where else do they go? Who do they go to for a second opinion? It's really important to know that, because they will ask their communities for advice. They will ask and reach out. It may be in response to, or in addition to, professional advice, or it could be because of this, that they don't want to bother a professional. So they will actually ask for advice from their peers, because that's really important. And that's great that they can get that advice. But the problem is that advice might not be right, okay? And that influence from peers may have more of an impact than health professional advice. And if it does have more of an impact, then that could cause concerns for the care that is being suggested by the peers. There have been some studies that have reported potentially dangerous or discredited advice giving, which can't be transferred from one situation to another. And I'll give you an example of a quote here. I would suggest that you ignore the advice from the nurse, to be honest. I'm sure you'd be doing what feels right to you as a mother, and you should have confidence in your own decision making. Trust your own judgment. Now, if I can remember rightly off the top of my head, because there's a lot of information here, I actually think that this advice was in relation to a premature a preemie baby group. It was parents who had premature babies, and it was advice and guidance around feeding the baby. So, and even though that might be a nice thing for someone to say as advice, it may actually not be the right advice for that baby and that parent in that set of circumstances. So it's just being mindful of that, and please ask your service users, where do they go online to get advice? And for us, I think we really need to think about the design of our services, our 9 to 5 approach to providing services. In some studies that I looked at, it suggested that Facebook, for example, Facebook use peaked between 9 and 10 o'clock at night. So if people are engaging between 9 and 10 o'clock at night, where's the services at that point of time? So this 9 to 5, the time, the space, all of that has no, there's no barrier there when we're engaging with technology. You can easily get online and get answers quickly, easily, from people all over the world at just a few buttons away, but that advice might not be right. Okay, so it's just thinking about that. Okay, and what helps? This will be the last slide, and then I'll stop, take a breath. So what helps? The reason why I've put this up here is because a lot of people will say to me, I deliver a lot of training around safeguarding, digital safeguarding, and have done so for a number of years. People will often say to me, Debbie, I really don't know very much about technology. I don't know what sites kids are on. I don't know what games they're on. I don't know what these things are, what apps or anything like that. And they get worried that they need to keep up to date with technology. Can I reassure you here and now, and please reassure the parents and carers that you're working with, it's not possible to keep up with it. It moves so fast. But the one thing we can do is have connections, and we can have conversations. And if we can talk to children and young people about what are they doing online, what are their concerns, have they got any worries, that is far better than being an expert when it comes to technology. Okay. Excuse me. And that links into that education and involvement. Being interested in what children and young people and adults are doing online is really important. And having those conversations rather than saying, I don't understand why you're interested in doing that. Being really interested is important. And then obviously being educated and having an understanding of how to deal with things if they go wrong, and the knowledge of the reporting procedures. Okay, I'm going to just mute myself and have a cough, and we'll go to the chat box and see if there's anything there. Okay.
Okay, sorry, Debbie, that it's happened to me once. I ended up having a coughing fit during a webinar.
It's a dry throat. It's not the virus.
It's not that. No. So I'm really surprised there's so few questions tonight. There's I've written a couple of questions down, but there's literally nothing in the Q&A box, guys. So if you have got a question for Debbie, stick it in that Q&A box. But I think the chat is incredibly busy with people talking about lots of different things. Sharing Tin has captured people's imaginations, I think, and made people think. And there's been a bit of conversation about how children, when they grow up, can actually sue their parents for what they might have put online about them. Bit of a question around that. lots of, I mean, I've just written down lots and lots of comments. People are talking about what they're doing. So some people are talking about, say, talking to parents about TikTok and about the use of different settings. I think Omar's just saying that he feels that actually rather than restricting it, talking about and showing an interest, as you've said, a lot of people are saying how that's much more important. Never assume people, this is another comment going on here, never assume people know what to do, always help them to do things or signpost to the service to help them. The data on Sharenting, people are just commenting on Sharenting a lot. So, and I know you did your dissertation on Sharenting, so you could do a whole webinar on just Sharenting, couldn't we? So, but there is one question that I've picked up, and the one question I've picked up, and the team might have picked up others because the chat is moving so quickly tonight. But the one question I've picked up was, what can service providers do to support people to get online? So, such as those without internet access who are expected to engage with social workers online. So I wonder if some of that is about digital poverty, perhaps, I don't know, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Debbie.
Actually, that was a great amount of time for me to have that little coughing fit there. That is a really important point around, and part of what I'm going to talk to you about tonight is going back to your organizations and having this conversation and talking about what do we need to do to, if we are going to start putting things online, what do we need to do? How do we engage our service users to help us design those services so that they can tell us what do they actually need if we do start to move things to online spaces? Or do we need to have clinics so that they can develop their digital skills, their literacy skills? Is there something that we can do? Even student groups, can students start to have some kind of way that we can do some courses? Rolling courses would be absolutely brilliant. Groups where we can get people a little bit more tech savvy and understand how to use something really simple, like even at this time of year when people are starting to buy devices for their children for Christmas. And the amount of times I've heard people say, sure, I don't do technology, and they're buying a device for their child and they don't know how to ensure that that device is locked down so that it's going to be suitable for that child, and so that they're not just giving them the keys to a car and saying, off you go and drive. I don't know how to drive, but try, see what you think. So it's just being mindful of that. So there's a lot that organisations have to do. There's a lot that we can do individually in terms of developing our own literacy skills, our digital literacy skills, and imparting that and starting the conversation with service users, asking them, making sure that their digital lives is a part of our assessments. And I think that even our assessment frameworks need to be revamped to look at that. The digital, Amanda Taylor-Bezic from Queen's talks about the red line running through everything is the digital. That needs to be something that we talk about explicitly. Going back to Sharenting though, because somebody said, yeah, you can sue your parents. Folks, we don't want a society where we start suing parents. That is the absolute last thing that anybody wants to do. And that's why we're really important in this process, having the conversation with parents about why are they sharing about their children? For those of you that are really interested in theory, the theory around self is a really interesting theory when you're thinking about sharenting. So where do I end and where does the child begin? My rights, their rights. By sharing about a parenting experience, you are implicating the child. So what information is the child's and what information is the parent's? There's loads of things there. And I do have, there is a respectful sharenting booklet that we developed here to help parents think about, top tips for sharing in a way that is going to be respectful, that we actually give children the choice about being a part of our narrative or not, as the case may be. And just asking that fundamental question, what am I doing this for? and who am I doing this for? For some parents, it might be about chronicling and having a journal for their child, and that's something that they can have forever after, because digital memories are important. But for others, it might be just about peacocking and saying, look at me, and how proud they are. And that theory around dramaturgy, the world is a stage and this is part of the stage. But that will have an impact on that child going forward when they reach the age of 18. So there's lots of things. I mean, it is a huge area. You could spend all day looking at parenting. Okay. So we'll move on. I'm conscious of the time. How are we getting on for time? How much more time do I have?
We've got about 15 minutes more, Debbie, if that's okay with you.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
We have a definite view in the chat that people really want you to come back and do some parenting, and there is a question about whether
not
you
a problem.
share the parenting booklet as well. So
yeah, absolutely. I can share the parenting booklet. How's that? I can do that, not a problem. Yep. Okay. So these things here, just wanted to say as well, in terms of the connectedness, again, linking it back to theory, because theory, if you want to interweave that through these webinars as well, we talk about attunement in attachment theory, and we talk about it's really important in terms of the relationship between the infant and the parent will work best if there is attunement and if the parent understands what the child's needs are, and there's a rhythm between the two. There's a kind of a symbiosis between the two. If a child or a young person gets a reaction from a parent which is, sure, what are you doing on that stupid device there? Why are you playing that game? And those sorts of reactions, then that is not being tuned into the child's world. And the problem there is when something goes wrong for that child or that young person, who are they going to go to? Are they going to go to that parent who doesn't understand, who doesn't see the benefit or the interest in that child's world, their gaming world, for example, or if the parent has created sort of some kind of an adversarial relationship with the device and bans the device or comes up with all of these convoluted screen time rules, that might cause real problems when that child is needing help. But if you have a parent that says, actually, I don't understand what that is, can you show me, and sits down and has a look and tries to understand that child's world and is tuned into that child's world, it may encourage that child to then go to that parent if something has gone wrong in that space for them. So it's just being mindful of that. So yeah, just wanted to mention that as well. Okay. And yeah, I think I'd said it's not about knowing everything about technology, it's about having conversations. That's really important. And also being a role model. I hear about parents saying, these children taking selfies of themselves all the time and doing these ridiculous photos of themselves. Why are they so obsessed with their phones? And I wonder sometimes, because if you look at parents, sometimes parents are the worst role models sometimes. And even if you think about parenting, parents don't necessarily respect children's boundaries when they start taking photographs of them in the bathtub, sitting on the toilet, sitting on the potty, falling asleep in their spaghetti when they're toddlers, all of those, when they're having a tantrum, and parents are recording this and putting this up on social media. And then they wonder why those children don't have boundaries or know what they shouldn't share when they're teenagers. And I just think the role modeling here and self-regulation is really important as well. So there's lots of conversations, but I'll leave that for the parenting webinar. Okay, so we'll move on and have a look at privacy. I know that I sort of flicked to this and then flicked back, but this is what we're going to look at just for a few more minutes. And I absolutely love this quote from Banksy. So just being mindful that invisibility is a superpower, but also just being mindful that having some kind of presence in the online world is great too, because we can do an awful lot of good. And when we use technology as a force for good, and if you think about how, and look, you'll all have in your own where you live and in your own networks examples of where technology has been used for such amazing things, and you honestly couldn't couldn't do the same thing that we do with technology face to face. We couldn't do this face to face. We couldn't get you all in one room that's going to be all at the same time and have this conversation. So technology can be brilliant. So there is some importance about having that online presence, but also just being mindful of privacy. Okay. So I want you to reflect and think about where you are on that kind of privacy sort of continuum. I do have some people will often say to me, I have nothing to hide. So why would I not share things on social media? I have nothing to hide. And actually, folks, for me, that is a complete misunderstanding of the issue. It's not about not having something to hide. It's about having everything to protect, because everything that you put out there, and I think it's just being mindful of this. Whatever you put out there is being consumed by somebody, being used by somebody, whether it's your friends, your family, your contacts, your colleagues, your networks, or advertisers, scammers, cyber criminals. We don't know in the future what's going to happen in terms of data that is left behind now. And this is something that the Children's Commissioner for England has done some research about. If you look at Who Knows What About Me, really interesting report. We don't know what impact that's going to have in the future on maybe getting a job, insurance prospects, getting a loan, getting a mortgage, health insurance, all of those sorts of things. How are those things possibly going to be impacted by all the stuff that's out there, all that data that's out there? So just being mindful of that. So think about this. It's not about not having something to hide. What is it about that you have to protect? And again, Russell Belk talks about the fact that we can't see this digital clutter doesn't necessarily give us the same level of respect for how much is out there. If you could see it, you might sift through it and tidy it up and do something about it. So it's just being mindful of that and thinking about, well, if you could actually see what other people are seeing, and people have already talked about doing a Google search, if you could see what other people are seeing, would you shut some of those doors in your digital house, or lock them or clean them out? Okay. So here I just want you to think about this kind of balancing act that we need to do around privacy and security, convenience and security, because most people will have a device, a smart device. I don't know why they call them phones anymore, because we use them as our personal computers. So most of us will have smart devices. There will be pockets of digital poverty, and there will be some people that opt for the old Nokia that only texts and that's that. But if you do have a smart device, I want you to think about this in terms of convenience and security. If you increase the convenience of use, and by that I mean it's easy to get into, we've all been dogged by passwords that we can't remember, or two-factor authentication and all of these sorts of things, or one-time passwords, or one-time, all of these sorts of codes and things like that. If you increase the convenience, if you make it easier to get into devices, then that's going to reduce the security. I hope that makes sense, folks. And it does the flip side. If you decrease the convenience and increase the security, then you've got that imbalance as well. So it's finding a balance there that's going to work for us, and asking yourself these questions. Firstly, what device do you use to access your online world? So here and now, what is the device? And I'm going to hazard a guess. It's the smallest one, the smartphone, the smallest one that may be easier to lose. Okay, so being mindful of that. How secure is it? So it absolutely blows my mind when people say that they've got no password, no lock, no nothing. Nothing is securing the front door of their online world. So is it going to be your date of birth, or your children's date of birth, or your partner's date of birth, or the default password? So how secure is it? We talk about having antivirus software on devices such as laptops and computers, but do you have it on your phone? Do you have it on the device that you use to access your online world? If you don't, you need to ask yourself the question, why not? Because if that's where you're doing all your online stuff. Why is there no security there? So ask yourself that question. And once inside your device, where can people roam? Could they go anywhere? Is everything unlocked? Are all the doors unlocked is the door to the bank unlocked in your digital house? Is the door to your social media unlocked? What doors do you have in that digital house, and are they locked? If you lost that device, or if you flushed it down the toilet, or whatever it is that you do with it, how can you address that? Are you able to wipe it remotely? Can you do something remotely that's going to lock it down so that it's not going to cause any bother? So it's just being mindful of that and thinking about that. Once inside, what could somebody access? If you lost it, what would happen? Just thinking about that and thinking about how you can lock down that device. CEOP have a really good video called Jigsaw, and I would encourage you to have a look at that. CEOP, it's C-E-O-P, Child Exploitation Online Protection. If you look at Think You Know, even look at that, Think You Know with a U, and Google Jigsaw. It's a video, and it's a fantastic video because it makes you think about someone coming into your home, picking up your diary, flicking through your diary, seeing what you've been doing, what you had for tea last night, who you visited last night, who you were with, where you went on holidays, going over to your mantelpiece and taking off your family photos and taking them home with them. Strangers, random strangers doing this, because it is intangible in these sorts of spaces. Do we actually take as much care about the privacy? So I would just think about that and think about what do you have out there that could be accessed by other people or consumed by other people, and how can you make sure that you've looked at that that kind of balance there for you in terms of convenience and security? Have you got that balance right? If you haven't, what are you going to do about it? Start doing something about that. Okay. All right. Nothing's free. No such thing as a free lunch. I just want to touch on this very quickly, folks, because it's a really interesting thing. A lot of people will say to me, "Oh, Debbie, I can't believe this. The other day I was talking about buying a new sofa, and then it was in my news feed, a new sofa. DFS is having a sale, or whoever's having a sale. I can't believe it. How on earth did that happen?" Well, folks, it's because of this on the left-hand side of your screen, the microphone. It's really important, folks, unless there is a functional reason why your device needs to have the microphone and the camera and the location turned on, turn it off. Really important, okay? And just to be mindful that there is no such thing as free. You are paying with a different currency when you are using and consuming technology. You're paying with your data and you're paying with your privacy. And how much of that are you happy to give away? That's what you need to think about. You're paying with your children's data and you're paying with your children's privacy when you share it. You're paying with your friends' privacy and their data when you tag them and when you include them in things without them knowing about it or without them being asked. So just think about this. And I think that the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal just really did waken people up as to what was going on here, and what they were actually using as their transaction currency when they engage with social media, for example. So it's being really mindful of that. So that's the first thing I'd say to you, is turn that all off, folks, unless unless there's some functional reason why you need to have it on, turn it off, okay? All right. So a couple of other things in terms of privacy and our digital footprint. What do we actually mean? Okay, so we've talked about that. Parents posting pics, children's posting. Children today are likely to have a permanent record of their lives online, sometimes starting pre-birth, actually sometimes in some cases preconception, because if a couple are getting support, fertility support, they may share about that fertility support journey. So it may well be the journey now, the proverbial photo album will start preconception, pre-birth, and there will be that permanent record. So it's thinking about the impact of that. Couple of stats for you. You can have a read there. By the age of 13, 1,300 photos and videos of children being posted to social media by parents. And on average, children post to social media 26 times a day, which is about 70,000 posts by the age of 18. Folks, that's an awful lot of digital clutter that can be sifted through and used or abused. So being mindful of that. And that comes from the Children's Commissioner. That's the report I mentioned. I'd encourage you to have a look at that. Okay, so what do we need to do and how do we need to prepare ourselves and the people that we work with? So for you, think about your own digital literacy. Think about how you can increase your digital literacy skills. Do a spring clean, absolutely. Your family and friends, prepare them, talk to them about how you would want them to manage situations if you were tagged or mentioned, or if a service user bumped into your family or friends in the online spaces, or actively sort them out. How do you want your family and friends to manage that? Your organisation, do they have policies and procedures to safeguard you if there are any issues or incidents of service users implicating you in online spaces? Do you have any policies and procedures around digitalisation? Are your assessments including the digital, people's digital lives? Is that being included? And does your organisation moderate or signpost outside 9 to 5? What is their online presence, and is it an active, real presence? And service users as well. Discuss the digital with your service users. Talk with them about where they go and get their help online. Okay, and these are things that you can talk to your manager, your team in your placement. Mobile device use, your own mobile device, your personal mobile device use. What are the agreements around, say, for example, Google mapping a service user's home so you can find how to get to their house, because that is service user data in your personal device. So thinking about GDPR, data protection regulations, all of those sorts of things, is that okay or not? Phoning them to say that you're running late. People will say to me, but I've got my number blocked. Okay, so you've blocked your number, but you've got the service user's number in your personal device. That's an issue because that's private information that you've got on a personal device. So thinking about that, thinking about device app settings, and we've talked about the microphone and permission, the camera permissions. WhatsApp groups. If you're a student, we all love WhatsApp. That's great. It's a great way to keep in contact. But what are the rules around WhatsApp groups if you're on placement or if you're in the workplace? What is the conduct around that, the boundaries around that, and what is discussed, and what are the agreements around that? And Facebook snooping. Even if you weren't thinking about this from a legal point of view, even from an ethical point of view, respect for private and family life. Dr. Tarsum Singh Poona from the University of Birmingham, is he? Yeah, yep. I've got that right. Okay, cool. He is the one that's done a lot of work around this, around students possibly, or social workers looking at stuff but not realizing actually that is breaching people's right to a private and family life, and potentially breaking laws as well. Do we discuss the digital, having that conversation? Do we talk digital with our service users? And this is just an excerpt from the covert surveillance of social networking sites. The fact that digital investigation is routine or easy to conduct does not reduce the need for authorization. Even if service users have things in the public domain, does not mean that we can, as agents of the state, go around and snoop at that. Let alone it not being an illegal thing to do, it is not ethical, and it's a boundary issue as well. So there's lots of issues there. And we need to talk to our service users about, if we bumped into a service user in real life, how would we manage that? I would always talk to students about the closure phase of our intervention with service users. What conversations do you have when you end? At the end of this, what's the agreement about if we did bump into each other, particularly if you're likely to bump into each other? How do you want to conduct that? What do you want to be mutually agreed arrangements? That's no different to online boundaries as well. Being mindful that we need to have discussions with service users about home assistants, portals, or any surveillance devices they have in their homes, because sometimes they may well be, that might be being recorded and they're not telling us that. There could be covert surveillance there, or it could be accidental. So it's just being mindful of us, their use of technology and our use of technology, and discussing those privacy expectations. And it's fine, folks, until it's not fine. That's probably the main thing to say there. You can have a look at this. BASWA, the British Association of Social Workers, have a social media policy. Please take some time to look at that and download that, and maybe even take that to your team and have a conversation about this. I'd mentioned WhatsApp. This is just an example from Wales, care home manager who had been struck off for saying awful things about a young person in care. And this was a WhatsApp group, and these were some of the things that came out of that WhatsApp group. But the manager didn't understand that he'd done anything wrong. And I guess that sort of discussion that you might have with someone face to face, when it's online, it's a completely different beast. And it's just being mindful of that. Totally disrespectful. Okay. Someone's already Googled themselves. This is my second to last slide, so I'm going to stop in a minute. But this is a question to ask yourself. Google yourself, folks. It's an interesting activity. If you've got a colleague that you trust and you're willing to do a mutually kind of a search on each other, that's really interesting as well. Just say, you Google me, I'll Google you, and see what we can find. Do you have pets? Do you have children? Where do you like to go for holidays? What date of birth? All of that sort of thing, things that you're interested in. So just think about this from all of these angles. If I Googled you, what would I find said all of these people? Now, could be a service user who wants to find you because they want to say thank you to you, and that's brilliant, but it may not be for that reason. So it's just thinking about how you're going to manage that. A future employer, Orange, the telephone company, Orange, have a video called Digital Dirt Sticks. It's really interesting. Have a look at that. Someone who wants to alter, sell, share, or deep fake your images or your children. So deep fakes is where you can make those videos come to life, and you can overdub something else coming out of the person's mouth. Said your kids or your parents. Said who? You know who you would want or not want to find if they Googled you. And just another quote from Jim Gamble, that friends are friends, this myth around friends or friends, it's a really easy way to infiltrate somebody's life. If you can't get through the front door, you're going to try the side door, the back door, or an upper story window. The audience is huge when you start sharing in those spaces. So finally, is that all right, Siobhan? I am finally, and this is last final tips. And I just love this little critter saying, hold steady on there. Because if anyone's going, oh my goodness, there's too much here, just some final tips. Think about where you are on that continuum. Are you a digital optimist? Are you a digital pessimist? Are you controlling, casual, or confident when it comes to technology? Because how you respond is what you're going to convey to the people that you work with. Okay, so think about that. Review your digital footprint, please. And if you're a parent, please review what you're creating for your children, and ask yourself that question: who am I doing this for and why? I'm really interested in whether or not the new currency of likes and shares is the way that we calculate our self-worth. And I think that's a really, really interesting point. And are we sharing because when people tell us, oh, aren't you fabulous, mummy? Aren't you a fabulous daddy? Is that just going to make us think, oh, I am fabulous, and then feed into this cycle of I'm going to share more because you're giving me these positive things back, without actually asking that question? I'm implicating another person here, another human being who hasn't necessarily the ability to consent to being involved in that narrative until they're much older, or even understand the impact of that sharenting. So just give yourself some time to think about that if you're a sharent. Lockdown is the Collins word for the year, isn't it? So your privacy settings on your social networking site, lock them down. I think somebody said in the chat very early on, they've got the maximum settings. That's great. Do lock them down, review them regularly, and just be mindful that sometimes some apps, when they update, may end up defaulting to, they might update with the default settings. So just regularly update them, and check that they're at the level that you want them to be at. Consider your profile pictures and your name as well. We have talked about that. A lot of people said that they changed their name on social media. Also make sure that you change your web address. So for example, on facebook.com/ and then your name, change that as well, not just your profile name. Your profile picture, just be mindful that if you've got children in your profile picture and there's comments about that profile picture and they're wearing school uniforms, you are increasing those children's visibility, and reducing their privacy, and people can use that information, if they wanted to use that information. Who can find you, follow you, friend you, and message you? Just be mindful of that. What does your data and your online footprint say about you and your value base? Ask that question, have a bit of a look around and see what it does say. Do your digital spring clean. Okay, what else are we doing at the moment? And consider your own digital literacy and how to develop it so you can help yourself, your family, and service users. Really, really important. And consider a professional profile or account as well. That's me. I'm going to land the plane right now. There we go. We have done the kind of EasyJet or Ryanair. We've landed on time or a few minutes over. Sorry about that. This is another video that I would like you to look at. It's around digitalization, specifically around digitalization and social work. So that's me, folks. Thank you very much. I hope that's been useful for you. And I'll hand over to the team and they can let me know any lastminute.com messages coming through or anything else you...
I think the only thing I can say, lastminute.com, is everyone is saying what a great webinar, such a lot to reflect on, so many things I'm going to be doing now as a result of this. Thank you so much. Thanks for the advice. People saying, oh, I've really changed my opinion during this session. I'm really going to go off and do this. I'm going to talk to my manager about this. It's just brilliant. Now the chat, there is so much. People are saying thank you so much, but people are really desperately wanting you to come back and do something.
Okay, I'll come back.
That would be wonderful.
Absolutely.
A webinar on sharing would be great. And I know, Debbie, when you and I talked about you putting this together and doing this, we also talked about asking Tarsum to come back, and Tarsum's coming in February to do something about his Facebook research.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. So I think
go on, Debbie.
I was just going to say, I just think it's a really interesting area, because I just think that because technology makes things really easy doesn't mean that it's right. And I think we really need to be careful about that. I think that we are trampling all over service users' human rights when we start thinking it's okay to proverbially walk down their road and stand outside their house and look through their windows and see what they're doing. That's what we're doing when we start Facebook snooping them, and that is even just not even a legal level, but even just on a values level, that is a fundamental breach of trust, and we are meant to uphold trust and confidence in what we do. And I think that it creates lots and lots of challenges. And I think that there is a bigger conversation to be had around the use of technology and surveillance, but that is for another day. Absolutely for another day. But thank you. And sorry about the coughing fit. It was just the dry throat. It was nothing else.
That was fabulous, Debbie. I think the thing is, just as you said, what you've really done for us tonight is you've really started a conversation, and it's so interesting watching it from the other side. Is that, as I said to you earlier, oh no, there's been no questions in the Q&A. There's been hundreds now. I mean, the team have been dealing with them away. There's so many asking, well, how do I do this? How do I do that? And I think we've managed as a team to answer some of the questions about specifically how do you switch down this, or how do you lock down that, or something. So
And look, and there's absolutely loads of resources online. So it's all out there. You know, there's so much out there. If you're not sure, you can find it online. And as I said, I'm no expert in this. This is something that I've just been interested in for years and years and years. And it's just something that I do an awful lot of reading and research, and because it fascinates me, and I just think that technology is brilliant, but we need to know how to use it, and we need to help the people that we're working with use it in a way that's going to be meaningful, and help safeguard them as well. So so I am passionate about it, so I'm more than happy to come back and talk about parenting. Be more than happy to do that.
Absolutely great.
So thank you for inviting me along, and I wish everyone the best, and wherever you are in the world, take care. And
well, we've got people are now saying that this has been the best webinar, loads of really, so thank you so much.
Oh, brilliant. That's good to hear. Thanks, folks. That's really good. And yes, continue the conversation. This is a conversation. It's a bit like, I don't know if I said this before, but I certainly said it to you, Siobhan. This is a little bit like anti-oppressive practice was about 20 years ago. It seemed to be something that we tacked on to the role of the social worker. It's almost like an in addition to, whereas this, an anti-oppressive practice, is a very thread that interweaves everything we do. Amanda Taylor-Bezic, as you can see on the screen here, she talks about the red line running through everything is the digital. You can't get away from it. Anything that we do as social workers, digital. Child abuse, digital. Domestic abuse, digital. Everything, it's there. So we need to, if we are agents of change, and if we are going to empower people, we need to make sure that we're digitally savvy as well. So, and it's not about going on a course and doing it yourself. You can actually do a lot of this yourself. Read, follow people. There's loads of resources out there. So good luck on your digital journeys, folks. And thank you, Siobhan and the team, for your great help. And I'm glad the tech worked tonight without any problems.
Yeah, and thank you very much. And as everybody knows, if unless this is your very first webinar, you will know that what we do is over the weekend, we will send you an email with some follow-up resources from tonight. Some of the things that Debbie shared with us, we'll send over to you. And next week's webinar, I think the team have been putting the link into the chat, although because it's still moving quickly, you might not have found it, but it's just gone in there again. Next week's webinar, we'll be looking at relationships-based practice, specifically managing endings of relationships, which is actually a really important topic. We'll be joined by Claire Skilliter, and we'll be delivering that jointly. So all about relationships-based practice and endings. But I'm seeing here someone saying this is my first ever webinar and I really enjoyed it, so thank you very much. And other people are saying this is the 20th one I've attended. So and yeah, as Claire said, you've got to Claire, whose first webinar it is, Kelly's telling you you've got 22 to catch up on, and you can watch them all back on YouTube. And I'm actually thinking I'm going to watch this one back on YouTube myself, Debbie, because I need to take in a bit more of the learning. So it'll go up onto YouTube over the weekend. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you.
And good night to everybody. Thank you.
Bye.